It's 7:30 in the evening across India. I am Tanvi Taneja, live from New Delhi. You're watching DD India Global. We'll bring you the day's big stories from across India and the world. My colleague Alain Delon joins me from Washington, D.C. Caroline, good to see you.
Good to see you too, Tanvi. It's 10 a.m. here in Washington, D.C. and 4 in the afternoon across Central Europe. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, is this the last chance for a ceasefire? US Secretary of State Blinken is in the Middle East again, pushing for a deal. But first, the headlines.
Antony Blinken holds a positive meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu to push for a last chance with ceasefire. Iran says Gaza ceasefire has nothing to do with retaliation for Hamas chief's assassination. Ukraine hits third bridge in Russia's Kursk region, claims to have repelled Moscow's overnight air attack, including on Kiev. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi to embark on an official visit to Poland and Ukraine between August 21st and 23rd. And presidential candidate Kamala Harris heads to the US Democratic Party convention in Chicago. US President Joe Biden to present keynote address at the convention in a goodbye of sorts. So the Russia-Ukraine conflict enters its 906th day on Monday. Ukraine's air defense units repelled Russia's overnight air attack, including on Kiev. Ukraine's Air Force said that all 11 drones that Moscow launched targeting Ukraine's territory were destroyed. Meanwhile, there were no immediate reports of any damage due to the attack or falling drone debris. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was briefed by his top commander on new details of the operation in Russia's West Kursk region. Ukrainian Air Force also claimed to have destroyed another strategic bridge over the same river in Russia's Kursk region. This has limited the supply capacity of a Russian group opposing the Ukrainian advance. Kiev said it had seized more than 80 settlements in Kursk since launching a surprise strike across the border on August 6th. Meanwhile, Moscow said that Ukraine has struck and damaged the third bridge in Kursk region as Kiev forces attempt to expand its incursion within the Russian territory. Russian Ministry of Emergencies today released videos showing civilians evacuated from the Kursk region amid the continued advance of Ukrainian forces into the border region. According to the ministry, the latest group of evacuees were taken to Saratov, Samara and Tambov regions. The ministry also reported that more than 10,000 local residents were staying at temporary accommodation centers in other parts of the country. Russian officials have said that nearly 200,000 people were being evacuated following the attack. DD India's Dasha Chernyshova joins us live from Moscow for more on the story. Dasha, how much pressure is Kremlin under with Ukraine destroying the third bridge in Kursk?
Well, there is a lot of pressure on the Kremlin at the moment because the evacuations of those border areas in the Kursk and Belgorod region have been widespread. The Russian officials have confirmed that over the past 2 weeks, almost over 121,000 people have been evacuated only from the border, from 9 border districts of the Kursk region. There have been more evacuations taking place, and this process is ongoing. These people are being assisted by the Russian state or their relatives in other regions. They have to flee and find their places elsewhere. As the school year is about to begin on the 1st of September, there is a lot of pressure from this humanitarian side, from this humanitarian point of view, and many Russians are very concerned about how this process is going to begin for the children who have been displaced from those areas. At the same time, we keep hearing here from the Russian Ministry of Defense that they are repelling the Ukrainian attempts to move any deeper deeper into the Russian territories, namely in the Kursk region, that they are striking the enemy forces with their weapons both on the Russian soil in the Kursk region and also across the border in Ukraine's Sumy region. And also the Russian MOD is saying that Ukraine is trying to regroup while confirming that Moscow is not pulling its resources out from the areas of the fighting in Donbass, for instance. So there is a lot going on with this Kursk incursion, and the Kremlin has to react to this developing and very fluid situation. In the meantime, we are hearing the Russian officials confirm that after the incursion in the Kursk region, it is very difficult to talk about any prospect for the negotiated settlement of the conflict in Ukraine, with the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov on Monday also confirming that it is obvious that Ukraine got the consent from the West to carry out this attack, and now it is becoming obvious that everybody in the West, the supporters of Ukraine, have never been interested in finding a negotiated settlement. But this is also given some sort of boost to the authorities at the Kremlin, or the population here in Russia, seeing that as part of this ongoing fight between Russia and the West. But certainly with the fluidity of this situation, there is a lot of pressure on the Kremlin, and there is the sort of expectation that time will come when Russia will definitely retaliate against this Ukrainian incursion.
Dasha Chernyshev in Moscow, thank you very much for those updates. And Russian President Vladimir Putin is in Azerbaijan's capital Baku on a two-day visit. Putin held talks with his Azerbaijani counterpart Ilham Aliyev. Both the leaders discussed further development of bilateral relations, strategic partnership and some other regional and international issues. In a ceremony in Baku, the two leaders agreed to develop energy cooperation between Russia and Azerbaijan. The two leaders also addressed a joint press conference later. Earlier, Putin paid tribute to the late Haydar Aliyev, first president of post-Soviet Azerbaijan and father of the incumbent leader Ilham Aliyev. He also laid a wreath at the Eternal Flame Memorial devoted to the martyrs, the fallen Azerbaijani soldiers. And on to the US now. The four-day Democratic National Convention 2024 begins in Chicago today. Kamala Harris is expected to receive the formal nomination as the Democrats' candidate for the upcoming presidential election in November. My colleague Caroline Malone is in Washington, D.C. She gives us more on this and other stories making headlines around the world. Caroline, so what can we expect in Chicago over the next 4 days?
Well, we can expect a host of famous speakers, from former presidents to celebrities. And of course, Harris will be officially confirmed as the Democratic Party's nominee. She's already in the state ahead of the main events. Now, the convention will take place at the United Center, which is home to two professional sports teams in the city, the Chicago Bulls and Chicago Blackhawks. Harris, who will address the convention on Thursday, is entering this week boosted by a string of polls that show she's moving ahead of Donald Trump in many swing states, including many places that strongly favored Trump in the final weeks of Biden's candidacy. Well, Hollywood stars are attending the four-day Democratic National Convention in Chicago. That includes a number of well-known actors and musicians, including Julia Louis-Dreyfus, Mindy Kaling, John Legend and Billy Porter. Also, the former New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern will attend the Democratic National Convention. Well, for more DD India's Nick Harper joins us live from Washington, D.C. So, Nick, what more can we expect from day one of the convention?
Well, Caroline, day one of this four-day event, a made-for-TV event, during which we will hear much about Kamala Harris, her vision for the future of America, and really this being the Democrats' opportunity to sell her to the whole of the country. But on day one, we'll be hearing from President Joe Biden. A few weeks ago, of course, he was the man that would have been making the headline speech at the end of the convention on Thursday and being formally conferred as the nominee for the Democratic Party. He has since stepped aside, so instead he's relegated to day one, giving a headline speech where we're likely to hear really what he's achieved during the last 3.5 years in office. but very much passing the torch on to Kamala Harris and laying out why he believes she should be the next president of the United States. Of course, for her, it's been a whirlwind few weeks. We've seen that enthusiasm, that momentum, huge crowds at rallies, huge amounts of fundraising. And as you mentioned, she has really been catapulted in polling nationwide. One poll out in the last few days showing that she is now tied or ahead of her rival Donald Trump in 6 out of 7 of the swing states. But it's really a question how long this Harris honeymoon can continue. We're seeing that momentum now, but will it be sustained over the next 80 days or so until the election? And bear in mind, it's all very well that there is this enthusiasm in the Democratic Party, but she still needs to convince undecided voters out there that she is a better prospect for the country than Donald Trump.
But Nick, not everyone in Chicago is rallying behind Harris. There are thousands expected to take part in protests, aren't there?
That's right, yeah, those protests already underway, very much all about pro-Gaza protests and against what those protesters feel has been a staunch pro-Israel position from the Biden administration. Of course, Biden is not running again for re-election, but those protesters say that they believe Kamala Harris, as the face of the Democratic Party, still represents that position. They had a nickname for Joe Biden, Genocide Joe, because they feel under his watch there has been so many deaths in Gaza, of course topping more than 40,000 over the last few days during this now 10-month conflict. Now, these protests will be peaceful. There's an incredible security presence in Chicago, but bear in mind that many of these protesters are the very people who voted for the Democrats 4 years ago but say they won't do so this time round in November. Palestinian Americans, Arab Americans, young voters, African Americans, the very coalitions that the Democratic Party relies on to be able to win elections. But they say because of what's happened in Gaza, they won't be able to vote for the Biden administration, with Harris topping the ticket in November.
Indeed, Nick, thank you. That was Nick Harper in Washington, D.C. Well, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Tel Aviv again as a proposed Israel-Hamas ceasefire deal hangs in the balance. Secretary Blinken described Washington, D.C.'s latest diplomatic push as the best, maybe the last opportunity to get hostages home. In a meeting with Israeli President Isaac Herzog, the top US diplomat said Washington is working to ensure that there is no regional escalation amid concerns over a possible retaliation attack by Iran.
This is a decisive moment, probably the best, maybe the last opportunity to get the hostages home, to get a ceasefire, and to put everyone on a better path to enduring peace and security. I'm here as part of an intensive diplomatic effort on President Biden's instructions to try to get this agreement to the line and ultimately over the line. It is time for it to get done. It's also time to make sure that no one takes any steps that could derail this process. And so we're working to make sure that there is no escalation, that there are no provocations, that there are no actions that in any way could move us away from getting this deal over the line, or, for that matter, escalating the conflict to other places and to greater intensity.
While recognizing the ceasefire efforts by the United States, Egypt and Qatar, Herzog said there was no greater humanitarian objective and there was no greater cause than bringing the hostages home.
At the bottom line of it, people have to understand it starts with the refusal of Hamas to move forward. We are simply still very hopeful that we can move forward in the negotiations that are held by the mediators. And I want to thank the United States, Egypt, and Qatar for their efforts on this, on behalf of this noble cause. There is no greater humanitarian objective and there's no greater humanitarian cause than bringing back our hostages home as they should have returned long ago.
Well, Secretary Blinken also held a meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem. Netanyahu's office said the meeting was positive and good-spirited. He also reiterated Israel's commitment to the latest proposal regarding the release of hostages. Well, Israeli police and the Shin Bet Domestic Intelligence Agency have confirmed a bomb blast in Tel Aviv late on Sunday was a terrorist attack. The man carrying the bomb, which exploded near a synagogue, was killed and a passerby was injured, according to police at the scene. Sunday's explosion came about an hour after Blinken arrived in Tel Aviv to push for a ceasefire in Gaza. Hamas's armed Al-Qassam Brigade has claimed responsibility for the bomb. While Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson said on Monday that a potential ceasefire in Gaza has, quote, nothing to do with Iran's retaliation for the killing of the Hamas military wing chief. Iran has threatened to retaliate against Israel after the assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran on July 31st. Israel has neither claimed nor denied responsibility for Haniyeh's death in the Iranian capital. Well, at least one person is dead after a luxury yacht sank off the coast of Italy's Sicily. Search and rescue efforts are underway for 6 people missing who are from the UK, the US and Canada. According to Italy's Coast Guard, the luxury sailboat with a British flag sank with 22 people on board when it was hit by a violent storm at sunrise. The Coast Guard and firefighters rescued 15 people, including a child. Well, Tajik-Russian singer Manazar, the latest musician to represent Russia in the Eurovision Song Contest, has just released a defiant anti-war track called Gun, which is a reworking of a track she wrote a decade earlier. It was released late last month as a single. Well, that's it from me here in Washington, D.C. Back to you in the studio, Tanvi.
Thank you, Caroline. Caroline Malone joining us from Washington, D.C. Moving on now, the Philippines has detected a new case of the Mpox virus in the country, the first since December last year, as per its health department, adding that it awaits test results before being able to determine the strain. The patient is a 33-year-old Filipino male who had no travel history outside the Philippines. Elsewhere in Africa, countries affected by the Mpox virus are ramping up measures to ensure that the virus is contained. The virus has so far spread to at least 13 countries of the continent, and the World Health Organization warns of a potential to spread even further. Sweden and Pakistan have also reported cases, with the EU announcing a travel advisory to the affected countries. Isabel Nakiria has more on this.
In response to the outbreak, affected countries in Africa have created incident management teams to step up preventive measures. Teams have been deployed at borders and at the airports to carry out testing and detection, contact tracing and increasing awareness to ensure compliance. Isolation units have also been set up at the borders where suspected cases are monitored as samples are taken for testing. Now, the World Health Organization says it's releasing $1.5 million in the coming days to respond to the emergency. The WHO is also speeding up the process of listing the vaccines available for emergency use. Countries in the global north have been urged to donate stockpiles of smallpox vaccines, which can also be used for monkeypox. Isabel Nakiria in Kampala reporting for DD India.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi interacted with the Indian contingent for Paris Paralympics 2024 virtually on Monday. During the interaction, the Prime Minister congratulated all athletes and said that this journey holds immense importance for every athlete and it's equally important for the country. The Paralympic Games are scheduled to be held from August 28th to September 8th in Paris. India have named 84 athletes to compete at the Paris 2024 Paralympics, and it is India's largest ever contingent sent to the Paralympic Games so far. India's Ministry of External Affairs announced that Prime Minister Narendra Modi will undertake an official visit to Ukraine on August 23rd. The ministry called the visit to be a landmark and historic one.
Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi will undertake an official visit to Ukraine later this week on Friday, 23rd August, at the invitation of President of Ukraine, His Excellency Volodymyr Zelensky. This also is a landmark and historic visit, since this will be the first time that an Indian Prime Minister will be visiting Ukraine in more than 30 years since the diplomatic relations were established between our countries. This landmark visit, of course, takes place against the backdrop of the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, which will also form part of discussions. As you are aware, India has consistently advocated for diplomacy and dialogue to reach a negotiated settlement.
Further, in the press briefing, it was informed that Prime Minister Narendra Modi will visit Poland on 21st and 22nd of August on the invitation of Prime Minister Donald Tusk.
Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi will be undertaking an official visit to Poland this week on 21st and 22nd August at the invitation of Prime Minister His Excellency Donald Tusk. This is a landmark visit as Prime Minister of India is visiting Poland after 45 years. The visit takes place as we also mark the 70th anniversary of the establishment of our diplomatic relations between India and Poland.
The Ministry of External Affairs also said that Prime Minister Modi will be accorded ceremonial welcome and will hold bilateral talks with his Polish counterpart.
Prime Minister Modi will be accorded a ceremonial welcome in addition to the talks with Prime Minister Donald Tusk. Prime Minister Modi will also call on President Andrzej Duda. Prime Minister Modi will also interact with members of the Indian community, select Polish business leaders and prominent Indologists. He will also visit memorials that commemorate the very special episodes of Jamnagar and Kolhapur in our shared history.
Malaysian Prime Minister Dato Seri Anwar bin Ibrahim will be on a 3-day visit to India beginning Monday. This will be the first visit of Anwar Ibrahim as the Prime Minister of Malaysia. India's External Affairs Ministry said that Prime Minister Anwar will hold bilateral discussions with Prime Minister Narendra Modi in New Delhi on Tuesday. During his visit, he will also call on President Draupadi Murmu and External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar. Nepal's Minister for Foreign Affairs, Dr. Arzu Rana Dioba, is in India on a 5-day official visit at the invitation of India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar. Both leaders held a bilateral meeting in New Delhi on Monday. The visit is expected to strengthen ties between the two nations and allow them to review progress in bilateral cooperation. Japanese Foreign Affairs Minister Kamikawa Yoko arrived in New Delhi for the third India-Japan 2+2 Foreign and Defence Ministers meeting. India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh and External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar will host the Japanese Defence and Foreign Affairs Minister for the third India-Japan 2+2 ministerial dialogue in New Delhi on Tuesday. During the bilateral talks and 2+2 meeting, the ministers will review the bilateral cooperation and explore new initiatives to further strengthen the engagements between the two countries. They will also exchange views on regional and global issues of mutual interest. South Korea and the United States kicked off annual summertime military exercises on Monday, seeking to boost their joint readiness to fend off North Korea's weapons and cyber threats. The Ulchi Freedom Shield exercises, set to end on August 29th, come as North Korea races to advance its nuclear and missile programs and tries to launch reconnaissance satellites. The drills will reflect realistic threats across all domains, including the North's missile threats, but also GPS jamming, cyber attacks, and other lessons learned from recent incidents, the two countries' militaries have said. And next, we take a look at other stories making news around the world. Posidonia oceanica, known as the lungs of the Mediterranean, is fighting for survival due to climate change, rising sea temperatures, alien species invasion, and direct human activities near the coasts. The unique sea grass is endemic to the Mediterranean and plays a vital role in maintaining marine health and combating climate change. A gamer with a penchant for retro consoles, Ibrahim Al Nasser from Saudi Arabia, has connected over 400 of such consoles to a single TV in his 9M by 5M gaming room, creating a world record. His setup showcases a wide range of consoles from the 1980s and 1990s, all connected in one room. Newspapers in France paid tribute on Monday morning to the late French star Alain Delon, who died on Sunday at the age of 88. He was already under legal protection over concerns of his health and well-being. Delon shot to fame in 2 films by Italian director Luchino Visconti. These films were Rocco and His Brothers in 1960 and The Leopard in 1963. First supermoon of 2024 rises over the Sydney Opera House. A rare convergence of a supermoon and a blue moon marks the first of 4 consecutive supermoons this year. As per NASA, the moon will appear full for 3 days from Sunday morning through early Wednesday morning. The moon is considered a supermoon when it reaches the closest point to Earth in its orbit, making it look much larger from Earth. A blue moon does not refer to its color, but when there are 2 full moons in a single month. India will witness the phenomena corresponding the festival of Raksha Bandhan celebrations during Monday night to Tuesday. You wouldn't want to miss this super rare blue moon. That's all for this edition of DD India Global. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. Connect with us on our different social media handles at DD India Live. And for those on the go, you can catch all the latest news and updates from India and the world on our DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. So we will be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Tanvi Taneja from my entire team here in New Delhi and elsewhere in the world. Thank you for watching. Namaskar.